I'm Donna Lampkin-Stevens, and we're back on Spotlight, where we feature the University of Central Arkansas's College of Fine Arts and Communication. Thanks for joining us. My guests today are Dr. Francie Bolter and Dr. John Vanderslice of UCA's Department of Writing, who will talk about Damien Echols and Lori Davis, who will be appearing at UCA as artists in residence on November 11th. So be sure to join us when we return for Spotlight.
At the University of Central Arkansas, I live in the only residential college in the country focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. I've had the opportunity to develop mobile apps for local businesses. And I've been able to do everything from intramural sports to campus radio.
It is my college. So.
UCA put me and my education front and center. Learn how at uca.edu.
Francie Bolter and John Vanderslice join me now from the Department of Writing. So welcome back to Spotlight, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, tell us a little bit about the history of the whole Artist in Residence program, how it got started and how it's funded.
Well, the Department of Writing, ever since we've been a separate department, has always invited distinguished writers to campus. And several years ago, the college, or the university, instituted a fine arts fee. Every student, depending on how many credit hours they're taking, pays a fee for fine arts, just like there's an athletic fee or other kinds of fees. And once that was instituted, it really helped raise money to bring in more and more prestigious artists to campus. So the different departments in the college each have a certain amount of money each year to bring in distinguished visiting artists. And they come, and not only to perform or to present, but to work with students and to help our students' training in the arts.
And that's what makes it a true residency,
Yeah,
right?
correct. That's right.
Okay. So who are some of the writers we've brought in the past? I know both of you have been involved in bringing people in the past.
Yeah, we've had amazing writers. I mean, just amazing people. Last year we had Jennifer Egan, Pulitzer Prize winner. She's our third Pulitzer Prize winner that we brought to UCA.
I didn't realize
Really?
that.
Yeah, Richard Russo won, and Michael Chabon won, and they're both fiction writers, and they were here. We had Rick Steves, famous travel writer, here a couple of years ago, a wonderful visit. Sharon Olds, a very distinguished poet. Last year we had Ed Sanders, who is a sort of infamous / famous old guy beat poet from New York, who was really very instrumental in a lot of the 60s movements in New York. Dave Eggers, one of our nonfiction writers.
Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman, oh yes, Neil Gaiman, can't forget Neil. And this coming spring, we're bringing Miranda July, who kind of wears all hats. She's a great fiction writer. She's also a screenwriter and an actress and a director and an artist. So she does a little bit of everything very well. And we're really excited that she's coming in the spring. Yeah.
So why is it important that our students be exposed to these opportunities?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question because after all, they are paying for it. You know, I think one of the things that we do is that we sometimes just say, here are some people who are models for you. Students ask a lot of questions about, I would say, the writing life, you know, and how do you do what you do? And they see people as professional writers and see that it can be done, and also get to ask, how is it done? We've had several people who've come and just talked about how they do what they do, which I think is very important for students, just to get that sense of it.
And sometimes it's better for them to hear from somebody besides us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you two could be artists in residence somewhere else. I think
Yeah.
you would be sort of,
Right.
but it's just good to be reinforced by someone else.
Yeah, because I mean, our students take several courses with all of us, and so they kind of know what we have to say about things, so it's always good for them to hear it from someone else. And every visiting writer brings their own kind of slant on the writing life and how their process of working and what they prioritize. So it's good for students to hear all that, different voices. Yeah.
You know, I always leave a presentation wanting to write, you know, wanting to, I don't know, get involved, re-embrace the creative process. And so I think that inspiration is also one of those reasons that we have people come.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have, are most of these people professors as well elsewhere? Many of them are.
Many of them are, yes. Which actually makes it easier, if they are, it makes it easiest for us to contact them.
Right.
Some of them have gotten to the point in their careers, they're so distinguished, they're not teaching, they're working as writers, living as writers.
But they have taught in the past, so they're used
Yes.
to working with
Some.
students.
Many
some,
of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them. That we have some writers who have not taught, but many of them have at some point in their careers, yeah.
I also think that, for lots of writers, they do engage in speaking tours, and they recognize that, that's part of their writing life too, is sharing it. And they have agents or they
Right.
Work with the Speakers Bureau, and so that's just part of kind of, I don't know, what they do, and they're really pretty good at it, talking with students.
Well, that brings us to our first residency of the school year, sponsored by the UCA Department of Writing, and it's Damien Echols and Lori Davis, who will be here November 11th. And a little bit of background, I think most people know that Echols was one of the West Memphis Three who were convicted of the murders of 3 8-year-old boys in West Memphis. Damien Echols spent 18 years on death row before he, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly Jr. were released in an offered plea with the state of Arkansas in August of 2011.
Right.
Okay?
Correct.
Now, Davis is his wife, whom Damien Echols married while he was in prison.
Yeah.
And the public part of the residency will be a reading from Echols' book, Life After Death, and there will also be a book signing at Reynolds Performance Hall at 7:30 on Monday, November 11th.
Correct.
Okay. So how did these two get on your wish list for the artist in residence? And I would
Yeah.
assume it's been a while coming.
Yes.
Yeah, you submit a proposal, and then it takes a whole year for that to work through. And I got interested in it when Damien's book Life After Death came out. We have had Mara Leverett, who wrote, I believe it's Devil's Knot was her first book, and then she has some sequels. We had her, gosh, back in,
Early OOs.
I was going to say 2000.
After she had written,
She was working on Devil's Knot. I believe it had been published.
Yeah, I think it had just
Okay.
been published.
okay.
And, she, I guess, exposed sort of some of the trial problems, and was very much an advocate for Echols' innocence, and he thanks her in his book. I think she made it clear that there were innocent people being put on death row, and it just seemed like it would bring things full circle if we brought Damien Echols to campus.
Okay, so, but when she was here, you had no inkling that he would not be eventually put to death.
Oh, right,
Oh,
that's correct.
absolutely, yes.
That's
yes.
correct. It seemed at that point like a long, tough fight, and with possibly no good resolution.
And at that point, he hadn't published anything.
No, not at all.
no.
And did you know he was a writer at that point, or?
I don't think I did. I don't think that came up. When
No, and to say he was a writer, he was incarcerated at 17. I mean, you don't really, I mean, he
Right.
wrote, and as a matter of fact, he talks in his book about his writing, and even that he kept a diary, and he was embarrassed when that diary was made public. I mean, who wants to have people see what you wrote when you were 12 years old? I sure don't.
No.
And that for a long time he didn't write at all. When he was first imprisoned, he didn't write at all because he felt like his words had been used against
used
him.
against him. Yeah.
Okay, so they were released in 2011. The book was published, it came out early 12 or late 12?
Autumn of 12. I
Autumn
believe.
of 12, so about a year ago.
Yeah.
So you thought, hey, let's try. So
I
tell me about the
did.
process of getting him here.
And so, and the other thing that happened is that Amy Berg had just finished, or it was in final production west of Memphis. And our hope, the
documentary
original
film.
idea, it is a documentary, and our original idea was that we would partner with film and bring Amy Berg and Damien here, maybe not exactly on the same week, but certainly kind of in tandem, and that would be really cool for both our film students and our writing students to just see how these two stories played out in two different ways. Amy Berg's schedule was just crazy, and it didn't allow her to be able to say yes. But Damien Echols, in working with his agent, I remember that first email. I believe I actually called Dustin and talked to him, and he said, I know Damien would have trouble coming back to Arkansas, but I'm certainly willing to ask. And so that's kind of how it got started.
So you just started the conversation with the agent?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Now, so what was the reaction? I mean, you sort of a wish and a prayer, and that this would come back, and then what was the response back?
Well, it was that, yes, he's interested.
Because at that point he had not been, and I'm not sure he has been
No,
back
he
to
has
Arkansas.
not been back to the state since he got out. In fact, in his book, he mentions that when he returned to the South briefly, I think he went to Nashville at some point, and he almost had a panic attack just going to Nashville. So I think he must have come to at least, hopefully, some resolution about he's able to come back to Arkansas to visit. I'm actually honored that he's going to come to UCA of all places.
I mean,
For his
I
first
just think
trip.
this is a coup. This
Yeah.
is an absolute
Yeah.
coup for us.
Well, it's pretty amazing. I've been really pleased. I believe that he's in Missouri, like before he comes to Arkansas.
Right.
So it's going to make the trip a little bit easier. He and Lori live in New York now, but yeah, I think we should feel that he's, I don't know, maybe trying to get past it. You'd have to in order to go ahead and live your life. So in some ways, I'm glad we can be part of that process.
Yeah.
So were the negotiations for this one different than others?
I don't have a sense of that. Yeah, that they were different. Yeah,
I mean,
but
Francie is working with his agent, and agents have lots of clients, and they're used to this. This is just their job, working out these arrangements, and they're all very professional. And it was, for the agent, it was just another job. We haven't spoken directly to Damien yet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now the agent, I understand, is from Russellville. Is that right?
He is.
Tell us, how did that?
Well, that was just one of those coincidences, just small town, just connections that you think, wow. So he was he understood very much our interest, but also Damien's hesitancy about maybe coming to Arkansas. So.
Well, tell us about the book. It's called Life After Death, and it was published, as you said, in August or autumn of 2012 after he'd been out. Did he finish it? Is it strict? And I've not seen it yet.
Okay.
Did he finish it after he got out?
He did.
Okay.
It's sort of assembled from things he wrote in different parts of his life. He wrote a lot in prison, and he basically told the story of his life up until being incarcerated, and then those early years of what prison was like. And he sort of took that and then added on to it for Life After Death. He includes the middle part of the book is a lot of just pure journal entries that he wrote in that kind of middle years where things were starting to be hopeful that maybe something was going to happen, but it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And then at the very end of the book, he tells the story of how they actually got released and how it was just so sudden.
Oh, I remember. It was just
almost overnight.
Overnight.
Yeah, and then a little bit about what it was like to be free after being on death row. So it's sort of taken from different writings that he did over the years, but certainly, he finished it when he was out.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that you learn in the book is that Lori smuggled some of Damien's writings out of prison. Just that she was able, because one of the things that kept happening is that guards would come and sort of take what you have in your cell. I haven't ever experienced prison, so I don't know if that's typical, but it sort of sounded like it was. And so you would lose things that you had collected, So he talks a bit about all the writing that was lost.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like more was lost than what it actually exists.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, it's pretty harrowing, his picture of a prison. I mean, you think prison is bad enough, but then to have feeling like those on the other side of the bars are trying to torture you in a sense, you think just being in a prison would be enough torture, but they're trying to make life as difficult as possible. And one way to do that is to deny your ability to communicate with the outside world and to just tell your story to the outside world. So basically Lori was really significant in him not only agitating for his cause on the outside, but letting him communicate with the outside by smuggling these journals that he wrote.
Well,
out.
back up. Writing brought them together. How,
Yeah, that's right.
Talk about the background there.
The documentary Paradise Lost is how she first came. The case came to her attention. She was living in New York and working at an architecture firm, and someone had just invited her to see this documentary, and she's like,
screening.
Yeah, she go, okay, and then she saw it and just got interested in it, and then wrote to Damien and just said, I really feel bad for you, and I believe you're innocent, and I just want you to know that. And so he immediately wrote back, and then that just started letter correspondence. And finally, they did meet in person. And at some point, they realized they were in love with each other and got married while he was still in prison.
And then she moved to Little Rock, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Before really there was any real hope that he was
Right.
to get out.
Yes,
Ever.
she moved here to act on his behalf, to agitate on his behalf, and apparently she did it really well. You want to tell that story?
Yeah, that was interesting because when they were sort of working out that offered plea, there's a comment that one of, I think it's
Dustin McDaniel.
Yeah, Dustin McDaniel, the Attorney General at the time, said, "Will this get rid of Lori Davis?" Yeah, no,
Good for her.
Exactly.
Good
Talk
for her.
You
about
could tell Damien was
advocacy.
very proud when he wrote that in the book, how proud he was that what she had been able to accomplish on his behalf.
Wow.
Yeah.
How would you describe his writing? I mean, he doesn't have a formal education.
He does not. As he says in the book, he was, especially when he first got into prison, a voracious reader. He read thousands of books. Lori says that Damien, once he gets interested in a topic, exhausts it. He just reads everything there is on that topic. But he's actually quite a good natural writer. It's a very powerful book. Just the picture of the environment that he came out of.
Pre-prison.
Pre-prison.
Right.
I mean, a lot
Talk
of
about that a little bit.
great,
What was his environment?
about at least half the book is about his life prior to the murders, and it's clear that what's really it's almost sad is he has a real deep affection for West Memphis. It to him, even today, it seems like that's home to him, and just the physical quality of the place he speaks of with great nostalgia. Even like a trailer park that he grew up in, which is a miserable place, and he even admits it's miserable, but to him that's still home. And like he would smell things that would remind him of that, and he would immediately go back and wish he could be there. So at one point, at one hand, he really feels a great deal of affection for the area that was his home, but it's also clear it was a very problematic childhood. He came from a broken home, a stepfather, which was, unfortunately not a good stepfather, and he was a kid who was considered to be a troublemaker, but I think it's clear that he was a misunderstood kid, a very smart but misunderstood kid who didn't feel like there was a lot of hope. And
he was just a sort of an outsider in lots of ways. I mean, his family was really incredibly poor.
Had they moved to West Memphis, or?
They did. They had moved. They had lived in many places,
Okay.
But West Memphis is where they finally seemed to settle and stay for a while. Yeah.
So that was his deepest roots, I guess.
Right.
But it's like, I think in lots of ways he has a childhood that we can understand, and when you're the completely different one, and you don't want people to come over to your house because you're so poor and you don't have any heat, or you don't have running water. It really sounded more like a kind of depression era life than contemporary society. I mean, it was surprising to me the sort of conditions in which he lived as a youngster.
Now, you mentioned he was a voracious reader. What did he read? And how do you get these books here in prison?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if he.
I guess there's a library.
Well,
most prisons
Lori
have
talks
libraries.
about sending him books, and that
Right.
she didn't find out until later that he didn't really like them. He read them because, of course, he would.
Yeah,
but
she had him read J.D. Salinger, some of it, and he apparently didn't like it.
I know. I don't know whether you get to. I know you get to keep them in your cell, and it seems like that he ended up rereading them because I think at
that's
some
true.
point he says you get 5 a week.
Okay, then then he must have had to reread. Well, he read clearly a lot of fiction. He likes Stephen King and that kind of fiction, but also he developed an interest in psychology and in history.
And religion.
He converted actually to Catholicism when he was in high school. Before anything happened with the murders and the police, he'd already converted to Catholicism, and that's actually his name. Damien was not the name he was given at birth. It was his confirmation name in the Catholic Church, named after Saint Damien. And while he was in prison, though, he developed an interest in Zen Buddhism, and his marriage was actually a Buddhist ceremony. And so he reads a lot into spirituality, books on spirituality, and religion of all kinds, and psychology. It seemed that was he realized he was going to have to battle to keep his sanity. And he said he'd seen so many people go crazy on death row that he knew he couldn't let that happen to him. So by writing and reading and also being very disciplined in sort of spiritual exercises, that's how he was able to preserve himself and his sanity and kind of fight back. But really it was just trying to maintain an identity and not let the craziness around him make him crazy.
And one of the things that he does well in his book is describe the craziness. And you really are just astonished at how someone could maintain sanity, and really not just sanity but humanity. And I think that's what reading and writing, I mean, I guess that's what struck me more than anything, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring him is just that he retained this humanity in an environment that absolutely, I don't know, takes it away at every turn.
Doesn't think of you as human.
Absolutely
treats you
not.
like human. There's many times in the book where he gets into lies that he were told during his trial, and he says, well, I can't perseverate on that because then I'm going to get angry, and then the anger is going to overwhelm me, and that's not going to help me. I want to stay focused on positive. So, and I mean, if you read a lot about the trial, it seems like there were a lot of lies told, and he had to bear the brunt of that.
He was the only one who was 18, and so he was the one who was eligible for the death penalty.
Right.
So.
Well, and also, for some reason, even well before any murders happened, it seems like the police had their eye on him. Like they were determined to see him as a bad kid, and when something happened, they were determined to put it on him.
Did he have a rap sheet before?
Well,
I mean, nothing.
Well, he
that's
he and his
right.
girlfriend ran away from school at the end of the school year. They decided they're young, it's romantic. We're going to run away to California. Well, they didn't get.
We're going to run away to California and get married.
Yeah.
We're going to elope. Our parents don't want us to get married, but we're going to have this life together.
And they ended up it was a really hot day, and they to get out of the heat, they went into an abandoned trailer home. This is still in West Memphis, and they were found out. They were
Her
caught.
parents called. Yeah.
And normally, you just get a slap on the wrist and a warning. What are you doing? He actually went to jail for a number of weeks, and then he was sent to a mental institution for that. And the police thought that's what he had to do, and so he did.
It was very strange. You recognize how important advocacy is in a person's life, and even just understanding of the law. I felt that he got caught up in a system that he didn't have people on the outside of that system able to extricate him from, because his parents weren't educated. His people weren't educated. It really did remind me of how education can keep you from a lot of things, and one is getting entangled in some kind of court system from which you can't extricate yourself.
He says in the book at one point that he never met anyone on death row with a college education, and almost nobody had a high school education. And so it just became all the more clear, how by not developing that side of yourself, what can happen to you, or not having the opportunity to.
How important it is.
Yeah.
Well, and in some ways, I don't know, maybe education allows you to be a little, I hate to say suspicious, but at least you might not take everything at face value. And I
Yeah.
thought that, and I think he admits to a certain naivete
Yeah.
about the justice system, and that he says, you know, I just couldn't believe that you would be innocent and then be convicted and be put in jail for something you didn't do. He never thought it was going to work that way.
Yeah.
Now, the university has drawn some criticism
Yep.
for bringing these two to campus, and what would you two say about that? Because some people, I mean, will believe until they die
Of course.
that these guys did
Right.
it.
And if that's the reason for being bitter about his appearance, I can understand it. But on the other hand, there are great number of people who are convinced that he was. You can't help but believe he's innocent. There's absolutely no evidence there's no physical evidence to link them to the crime scene. None. There simply does not exist. There is physical evidence that links other people to the crime scene, but for whatever reason, the police in West Memphis haven't chosen to go try to arrest anybody else. So we certainly would not have invited anyone to campus that we thought was guilty of murder.
That's a good point.
So let's just
okay,
get that out there.
I know.
That's a good point.
The other thing is,
Like, golly.
you know, if we're bringing in a speaker that is somewhat controversial, I think we're doing our job. I think the point of a university is to get people to meet different people from different walks of life and to hear different viewpoints. And I've tried to tell people, I've corresponded with some people who are angry about this, and I say, look, our students hear speakers all the time, and we teach them to listen carefully and to read critically, and this is just another speaker for them to hear. And he's got a fascinating story in the sense of he wrote essentially most of this book in prison, and I don't think we've ever had anybody on campus whose writing life took place in prison, certainly not on death row. And so that's a kind of perspective that I think showing the value of writing and the value of self-expression and artistic expression that I think could be very worthwhile for our students to hear. But certainly we're not bringing him here as to try to convert our students to anything, and that's not going to happen.
No,
I think that's sort of an exaggerated fear that some people have. And
Well, and you know, going back to that notion of being educated, I'm sure that many people who first, you know, read about the trial or saw it on TV, they formed an opinion, and yet we teach our students about received opinions, and we say, you know, you're a more educated individual if you seek information that allows you to form a more educated opinion. And I guess that's what happened for me, is that once you read about the trial of these three boys and all this, I don't know, problems with the evidence, all these things that they didn't introduce in court, some of the sort of coerced confessions of a...
yeah, coerce is an understatement.
Yeah, of a young boy whose IQ is, you know, thought to be about the third grade. You just go, golly, this is just a miscarriage of justice. And I think that's, I guess I would say to people who say, how could you bring these murderers to campus? I would say, well, you know, when you consider the facts, what we're really bringing to campus are people who've been accused of murder who were innocent. Pam Hobbs, the mother of one of the murdered boys, has just appeared with
Jason Baldwin.
Jason Baldwin.
One of the others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that she would do that if she
Yeah.
thought these boys were guilty.
Well, didn't I read that the parents of
Yeah.
two of the boys are convinced
Right.
that these older boys were not guilty.
So, I mean, it doesn't make them feel better about the murder of their children to think that someone else is serving,
Right.
or had to be punished for that, and the person who actually did
Is
it
still out
is
there.
still out there, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
There is, from what I understand, there is the West Memphis Three do have an active movement to try to get evidence to find out who actually did it, and
Right.
to work for the eventual conviction of that person.
And the state, and you mentioned Dustin McDaniel, who was the prosecutor at the
It was Attorney
no
General.
no at
Oh.
the time of the he was a West
At the
Memphis
time
police
of the
officer.
murder, I don't know actually about
I
that.
don't know either.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Dustin McDaniel?
I think
Oh.
he was
I
a
didn't know
West
that.
Memphis police officer at one.
Oh.
Maybe it's Jonesboro, somewhere up
Okay.
there. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Pardon me for
Yeah.
spreading false.
Sorry, Dustin.
But it seemed like they were trying to save face. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you agree
Yeah, I
after
think that's fair
after all
to
those
say.
after all those years? So
Yes.
tell me, I'm fascinated by Lori. What will she add to the residency?
You know, one of the things that we do know is that Damien doesn't travel without Lori, and when you read the book and you understand her role in his life, you get it. I read an interview that John sent me about Lori talking about living with Damien after he's gotten out, and just her understanding of where he is in his life, and even in his development as a person. And I think she comes, as his partner. And I also think she comes, I think one of the things that she could add, and I think she could probably go on the circuit and talk about advocacy. Advocacy writing is really pretty powerful, and it's actually something that we teach in our professional writing classes. So I would hope that some of our students could talk
Is
with
she
her
a
about
writer
that.
as well?
No,
I'm
I'm
not
sure she
aware.
wrote reams of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I've not read anything
specifically.
she's written.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But she certainly can talk about the legal system and advocating for those who have been wrongly convicted. She can talk a lot about that. I mean, Damien says if it were not for her, he would still be in prison, and perhaps even dead. Yeah.
Now, Francie, you mentioned something about his experience. Other people have come here to share their writing experience, but no one had, I can't remember how gracefully you put it, but it was something about how he used writing as a means to maintain his sanity.
Absolutely. I certainly think the creative spirit is an interesting component of our being, and I would love to talk with him about how do you find that in an environment which is really working to, I don't know, suck every bit of not only just creative spirit, but just spirit in general out of you. And so, where do you find it? How do words become, I don't know, a life-saving? Yeah. And I've been amazed that his humanity stayed intact. You read some of the descriptions of prison, just the physical environment of it, and he talks about that he can walk 2 steps, 2 steps this way, 2 steps that way, and that's your entire physical, I don't know, activity that you can do.
And if you ever had to leave a cell, you had to be in chains, and his feet would be bleeding because of the chains. And the
When you
food
have to
was
walk shackled,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even learn to walk freely?
Right. Yeah, I heard him say that that was one thing he had to adjust to when he first got out. He wasn't used to walking around without chains on.
It just makes your head explode thinking about it.
Well, maybe we'll learn some of these things in his presentation.
Yeah,
I hope,
I
and
think
I
so.
understand there's going to be sort of a discussion or a Q&A afterward.
Yes.
Or okay, so maybe some of these things will be addressed.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, this is probably the residency that is requiring the most security. So let's let our
Yeah.
audience know of some security measures.
Okay.
So
Sure.
I think that starts with getting here early, because everyone will be wanded
Right.
with a metal detector
Right.
before they go in the.
Right.
In their, what else do you know?
Well, you cannot bring any backpacks or bags or large purses.
I think any purses. I think they changed.
Okay.
They took out the word large
Okay,
because they
okay.
weren't sure of
Good.
what's large. So
Yeah, and we'll have the wand there. So, and the police will be both inside, at least as I understand it, inside the lobby in Reynolds and also in the hall where Damien Echols is speaking. So we're trying to make sure that if anyone has any inkling that they want to try to make a disturbance, there's no point in that. We're not going to let it happen.
The other thing that we are requiring is that people have a ticket. So doesn't cost anything, so the performance is free, but that you do have to get a ticket.
Right.
And you can come to Reynolds and get a ticket.
And as with any event, there's only so many tickets.
Right.
So,
and I understand it's more than half gone as we shoot this now.
That's super.
Yeah. So in fact, I picked up some media tickets yesterday, and someone had driven up and said I need 2 for. I think there's a limit of 2 per
Two
person.
per person, right.
You can pick up any will calls after 6 o'clock on the night of the 11th.
The seating is, open seating.
Open
so
seating.
First come, first serve.
But you must have a ticket, and once you're in, you're in. You're not. If you leave,
Correct.
you do not re-enter. So, okay. So other details about the residency.
He is doing an event just for our students, a small number of our students, an interview and a talk about the craft of writing.
Which is typical of these residencies.
Yeah, that's required of the
Okay.
residency, and that's happening in a different building at a different time of day. But
Okay.
that's just for our students.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So, what do you expect our students to learn from this one?
Well, that's kind of hard to predict with any writer, but I certainly would hope that they would learn appreciation for how in their own way they're kind of lucky compared to him, and their own ability to write freely and to publish if they choose without the kind of restrictions that he had. But I think it should be kind of inspirational to them to see what writing enabled him to do with himself and just to survive.
Students oftentimes ask, it's a common question in residencies, how do you deal with writer's block? And I just think, in some ways you just want them to set that aside and just really understand that writing is a creative act, and you have to, your own self work out ways and environments for you to be creative, and that it's not impossible because here someone was able to do it on death row, so come on. I hope it would inspire them in that way, just to kind of get over themselves and to think, oh, this is so hard and I just can't do it, and there's just so much noise and I have so much going on. It's that, you can do this.
And many of our students were not born when these murders
That is true.
happened. So I think that's going to be interesting as well.
But many of them know about the case.
Yes.
It's very
well
publicized.
And
stuff.
we have in our department, we have had several people who've used Devil's Knot, Mara Leverett's book, and just the West Memphis 3 advocacy as vehicles for writing.
Yeah.
And so, we had some students go to Little Rock and join protests or join advocacy groups. So that's going to be kind of neat. I hope we have some students coming back.
Yeah.
I think we
Kind
will.
of pay off for them.
Our journalism students are very excited about it.
Good.
So, okay. So, anything else? How is this good for the university and for Conway that this is his first time back? What'd you say?
Like I said, I'm honored that we're the recipients of the very first visit back to Arkansas. I think it's always good for UCA to be thought of as a place that is interested in free expression and interested in bringing different people of different points of view and to expose our students to them, even if they're controversial. I just think that's a good identity for a college to have. It's almost, if you don't have that identity, I don't even think you're a real college. That's my own bias, but that's what I think. So it's good that UCA is known for that, and it's very good that the College of Fine Arts and Communication is known for that, because I do think that's what we're about. Yeah.
I agree. Well, thanks so much to both of you. We've gone on and on, but I think we could go on and on more, and we will see. I think it's going to be fascinating on November 11th.
Me too.
I hope so.
We'll be back in a moment.
The University of Central Arkansas may be close to home, but it's taken me far. Through study abroad programs and teaching science to children in Rwanda. I've also had the opportunity to do cancer research as an undergrad. And I've discovered Greek life that's about giving back and having fun. UCA put me and my education front and center. Learn how at uca.edu.
For more information about the programs and people featured on the show, call the College of Fine Arts and Communication at 501-450-3293 or check us out on the web at www.uca.edu/CFAC. And be sure to like us on Facebook. We'll be back again next week, so please join us then for Spotlight.